The invasion of Earth took exactly 72 hours. Not because humanity did not fight. They fought with everything they had. Nuclear missiles flew into the sky. Jets screamed across burning cities. Soldiers fired until their weapons melted in their hands. None of it mattered. The Valori hegemony had conquered 1,000 worlds before Earth. Their ships blocked out the sun over every major city. Their plasma lances turned concrete into glass and steel into vapor. Their shields laughed at nuclear fire the way an elephant might laugh at a mosquito bite. Commander Elena Vasquez watched from a bunker beneath Geneva as the last resistance crumbled. She was 43 years old, a career military officer who had served the United Nations Defense Council for 20 years. She had trained for wars between nations. She had prepared for terrorist attacks and cyber warfare. Nobody had prepared her for this. The screens showed cities burning across every continent: New York, Beijing, Moscow, Lagos, Sydney. The Valori did not discriminate. They burned everything equally. "We have to surrender," said General Morrison, his voice hollow. "There is nothing left to fight with." Elena wanted to argue. Every fiber of her being screamed to keep fighting. But she looked at the screens again. She saw the death toll climbing into the billions. She saw children running through streets that would be ash in minutes. "Do it," she said. The surrender broadcast went out on every frequency. The fighting stopped. The plasma lances fell silent, and humanity learned what came next. The Valori did not exterminate. That was the first surprise. They collected. They used. Every species they conquered became part of their empire, not as citizens, but as resources, labor forces, mining crews, factory workers. Humanity would live, but humanity would serve. 3 weeks after the surrender, Elena stood in a processing center with 10,000 other humans. They had been sorted by skills and physical condition. Doctors went to medical stations on distant worlds. Engineers went to factory moons. Scientists went to research facilities where their knowledge could be extracted and exploited. Elena and her group were deemed suitable for heavy labor. They were loaded onto transport ships like cattle. The journey through hyperspace took 6 days. When the ships finally stopped, Elena looked through a viewport and saw their new home. Slag 7 was a moon orbiting a dying red star. The surface was gray and lifeless, covered with mountains of garbage that stretched from horizon to horizon. The garbage was not ordinary garbage. It was the waste of an interstellar empire. Broken ship components, failed weapons, discarded technology from 100 conquered civilizations. The hegemony threw away more advanced technology in a single day than Earth had produced in its entire history. Their job was to sort it, process it, extract any materials that still had value. The rest would be crushed and dumped into the star. The transport landed in a vast processing complex. Elena stepped out into thin air that smelled of metal and chemicals. The artificial atmosphere was breathable but harsh. Her lungs burned with every breath. A tall figure waited for them. Elena had seen Valori on the screens during the invasion. But this was her first time standing before one in person. The creature was insectoid, standing nearly 8 feet tall on 4 legs. Its body was covered in chitinous plates that gleamed like polished armor. 4 arms extended from its torso, each ending in clawed hands that clicked and twitched. Its head was elongated, with compound eyes that reflected the red light of the dying star, and mandibles that moved constantly as it spoke. "I am Overseer Sarek Vol," the creature said. Its voice came from a translator device embedded in its chest plate. The sound was flat and mechanical, stripped of all emotion. "You are now property of the Valori hegemony. Your designation is Labor Unit 774. You will meet daily processing quotas. You will receive protein rations based on productivity. You will not possess weapons. You will not possess communication devices. You will not attempt escape. Violation of any rule results in termination." Elena stepped forward. "My name is Elena Vasquez. I was a commander in the United Nations Defense Council. I request to speak with whoever is in charge of human welfare." Sarek Vol's compound eyes focused on her. For a long moment, the creature was silent. Then its mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "You misunderstand your situation, human. You have no name. You have a designation. You have no rank. You have a function. You are not prisoners with rights. You are resources with purposes. Be grateful we find you useful at all." The overseer turned and walked away, his four legs moving in perfect coordination. Guards herded the humans toward their barracks. Elena walked with them, her jaw tight, her eyes memorizing every detail of their prison. The barracks were utilitarian metal structures built into the side of a massive garbage mountain. Each building held 500 humans in cramped bunks. The air recyclers wheezed and rattled. The lighting was dim and inconsistent. The protein rations were gray paste that tasted like nothing and provided exactly enough calories to survive. On their first night, Elena gathered the other humans who had held leadership positions on Earth. There were 37 of them: military officers, government officials, corporate executives, all of them reduced to the same status as everyone else, all of them struggling to process what had happened. "We need to organize," Elena said. "We need to establish structure, routines. We need to keep people healthy and sane." "For what purpose?" asked a man named Heinrich, who had been a German defense minister. "We are slaves. We will die here. Why struggle to survive?" "Because we are human," Elena replied. "Because that is what we do. We survive. We adapt. We endure. And maybe if we are patient and smart, we find a way to fight back." Heinrich laughed bitterly. "Fight back? With what? Did you see their ships? Did you see their weapons? We cannot fight that. Nobody can fight that." Elena did not answer. She had no answer to give. But somewhere deep in her chest, a spark of defiance refused to die. The next morning, she met Chief Engineer Kofi Asante. Kofi was a tall man from Ghana who had designed power systems for the European Space Agency before the invasion. He had been assigned to the same processing unit as Elena. His job was to identify potentially valuable components in the garbage mountains and tag them for secondary processing. "Look at this," he said, showing Elena a twisted piece of metal on their first day of work. "Do you know what this is?" Elena shook her head. "It is a shield emitter from a Valori destroyer. Damaged, yes. Non-functional, certainly. But the core components are intact." Kofi turned the piece over in his hands. "On Earth, this single component would have advanced our technology by 50 years. Here, it is garbage. They throw it away without a second thought." Elena looked at the mountains of trash surrounding them. Millions of tons of broken technology, failed experiments, discarded weapons, all of it deemed worthless by the hegemony. "They have so much," she said slowly, "that they cannot imagine anyone finding value in what they discard." Kofi nodded. "They are rich beyond imagination, and that is their weakness. They do not understand scarcity. They do not understand making do with less. They do not understand people who must build everything from nothing." "What are you saying?" Kofi smiled for the first time since Earth fell. "I am saying that they have given us something priceless. They have given us the tools to hurt them. They just do not know it yet." That night, in a quiet corner of the barracks, Kofi showed Elena what he had found: a power coupling from a battlecruiser, a targeting sensor from a plasma lance, a fragment of shield generator with its frequency modulator still intact. "Each piece alone is useless," he explained, "but together, combined with knowledge and ingenuity, they become something more. The Valori have never faced an enemy that could match their technology. They have never needed to innovate or adapt. They simply overwhelm with superior numbers and firepower. And humans? Humans have spent their entire history fighting against superior odds. We invented guerrilla warfare. We built weapons from farming tools. We turned defeat into resistance and resistance into victory." Kofi's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "They think they have broken us. They think we are tamed animals now. They have made a terrible mistake." Elena looked at the components spread before them. She thought about the millions of humans on this moon, the billions more scattered across hegemony space, all of them seen as nothing more than labor, all of them underestimated. "How long?" she asked. "I do not know yet. Months, years. We need to learn their technology. We need to find their weaknesses. We need to build networks with the other slaves. And we need to do all of this without being noticed. That is impossible." Impossible was landing on the moon with 1960s technology. Impossible was splitting the atom. Impossible was surviving ice ages and plagues and extinction events. Kofi gathered the components and hid them beneath a loose floor panel. Humans specialize in impossible things. Elena sat in silence for a long time after Kofi left. She thought about her family, killed in the first hours of the invasion. She thought about her home, now a sheet of glass. She thought about every human who had died fighting, and every human who had surrendered, hoping to live. She thought about Sarek Vol's words. "You are resources with purposes. Be grateful we find you useful." The Valori saw humanity as cattle, as tools, as organic machines to be used until they broke and then discarded, like all the other garbage on this moon. They were wrong. Elena stood up and walked to the viewport. Outside, the red light of the dying star painted the garbage mountains in shades of blood. Somewhere in those mountains was everything they needed to fight back. All they had to do was find it. She pressed her hand against the cold glass. "You made a mistake," she whispered. "You gave us your scraps, and we are going to build something beautiful from them. Something terrible. Something that will make you wish you had killed us when you had the chance." The star burned on, indifferent. The garbage mountains loomed in silence, and deep in the barracks, humans began to dream of impossible things. The first phase of their resistance began the next day. Elena organized the labor units into informal networks. Doctors shared medical knowledge. Engineers identified useful components. Scientists developed ways to test and study alien technology without triggering alarms. Everyone contributed what they could. Everyone stayed invisible. The Valori never noticed. They had built their empire on the assumption that conquered species were broken. They did not look for resistance because they did not believe resistance was possible. They counted quotas and production rates and assumed that obedient numbers meant obedient slaves. Months passed. The humans learned the rhythms of their prison. They mapped the patrol routes and guard schedules. They identified which overseers were cruel and which were merely indifferent. They found hiding spots and secret meeting places. They built an invisible society beneath the surface of their slavery, and every day they gathered more scraps from the garbage mountains. Power cells, circuitry, weapon fragments, shield components. The hegemony's waste became humanity's treasure. Elena did not know what they would build. She did not know if they could succeed. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The Valori had given them hope disguised as garbage. And hope in the hands of humans was the most dangerous weapon in the universe. The work continued. The spark grew. And the hegemony, drunk on power and blind with arrogance, had no idea that their garbage moon was becoming a forge for revolution, a forge for war. 18 months had passed since humanity arrived on Slag 7. The red star still burned in the sky. The garbage mountains still stretched to every horizon. The protein paste still tasted like nothing. But beneath the surface, everything had changed. Elena stood in a hidden chamber, carved into the rock beneath Processing Complex 4. 30 humans surrounded her, each one a specialist in some field that the Valori considered useless. Engineers, physicists, chemists, computer scientists, doctors, all of them working toward a goal that seemed impossible. "Report," Elena said. Dr. Yuki Tanaka stepped forward. She was a small woman with gray-streaked hair and eyes that burned with intensity. Before the invasion, she had led a research team at CERN, studying particle physics and exotic energy states. The Valori had deemed her knowledge worthless and sent her to sort garbage. They could not have been more wrong. "I have finished analyzing the shield generator fragments," Yuki said, "and I have found something extraordinary." She spread a collection of papers across a makeshift table. The papers were covered with equations and diagrams, all written in tiny handwriting to save space. Paper was a rare resource on Slag 7. "The Valori shield system is based on layered frequency harmonics," she explained. "Each layer operates on a different frequency, and together they create a barrier that can absorb or deflect almost any form of energy. Plasma, lasers, kinetic impacts, even nuclear radiation. The shields are essentially perfect." "Then we cannot break them," said a man named Victor, who had been a Russian weapons designer. "No," Yuki said, and a smile crossed her face. "We cannot break them, but we can make them break themselves." She pointed to a specific diagram. "The layered frequencies create something called a harmonic resonance point. It is a flaw built into the physics of the system. If you hit the shield with exactly the right counter frequency, amplified to exactly the right power level, the layers do not absorb the energy. They magnify it. The shield inverts. Inverts? Elena asked. The defensive energy turns inward instead of outward. The shield becomes a weapon pointed at its own ship. The stronger the shield, the more violent the reaction. A battle cruiser with full shields would tear itself apart in seconds. Silence filled the chamber. Elena stared at the diagrams, her heart pounding. For 18 months, they had gathered components and studied alien technology. For 18 months, they had searched for any weakness in the hegemony's invincible fleet. And now, in this tiny chamber, beneath a garbage mountain, they had found it. Can we build something that produces this counter frequency? She asked. Yes, Yuki said. That is the beautiful part. We do not need advanced technology. We just need the right components arranged in the right way. And we have thousands of those components in the garbage piles above us. Kofi stepped forward. He had spent the past 18 months building a network of engineers and technicians across every processing complex on the moon. They had hidden thousands of salvaged components in secret caches, all waiting for a purpose. I have run the calculation, he said. We can build a weapon that produces the counter frequency. It will not look like much. It will be crude and ugly and held together with hope and wire. But it will work. How powerful? Elena asked. One shot from our weapon could destroy a battle cruiser, maybe a carrier if we are lucky. But there is a problem. Kofi's expression darkened. The power requirements are enormous. We would need to drain every salvaged power cell on the moon to charge it. We would get one shot, maybe two if we are very careful. After that, the weapon is dead. One shot, Victor said slowly, against a fleet that numbers in the thousands. One shot is more than we had yesterday, Elena replied. One shot is proof that they can be hurt. One shot is the beginning. She looked around the chamber at the faces of her people. Scientists who should have been exploring the universe. Engineers who should have been building wonders. All of them reduced to slaves, and all of them refusing to accept that fate. Build it, she said. Build the weapon, and then we will find a way to make one shot count. The work began in earnest. Kofi divided his teams into cells, each responsible for a specific component of the weapon. Nobody knew the full design except for him and Yuki. That way, if any cell was discovered, the others could continue. It was the same strategy that resistance movements had used on Earth for centuries. The biggest challenge was hiding their activities from the Valori. The overseers monitored production quotas carefully. Any drop in efficiency would trigger an investigation. So the humans worked harder than ever during their official shifts, exceeding their quotas by small margins. The extra productivity created slack that they could use for their secret work. They also had help from unexpected allies. The Morith were a reptilian species that had been enslaved by the hegemony for 3 centuries. They were cold-blooded creatures with scales the color of rust and eyes like yellow lanterns. The Valori used them for heavy lifting and dangerous work, considering them too stupid for anything else. The Valori were wrong about that too. Elena met their elder, Thesic, in a garbage processing yard during a night shift. The old Morith moved slowly, his scales scarred from centuries of labor, but his eyes were sharp and knowing. You are building something, Thesic said. His voice was a low rumble, like stones grinding together. We have watched your people. The way you sort components, the way you hide things, the way you whisper when you think no one can hear. Elena tensed. If the Morith reported them to the overseers, everything would be lost. Thousands of humans would be executed. Their dream would die before it could be born. What do you want? She asked carefully. Thesic was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of 300 years of bondage. We want to know if it can hurt them. Elena studied the old alien. She saw the scars on his scales. She saw the way his left arm hung crooked from some ancient injury never properly healed. She saw the fire that still burned in his yellow eyes despite everything the hegemony had done to extinguish it. Yes, she said, it can hurt them. Then we will help you hide it. We will help you build it. We will help you use it. Thesic bared his teeth in what might have been a smile. My people have served the hegemony for 300 years. We have forgotten what freedom tastes like, but we have never stopped dreaming of it. The alliance spread in whispers and shadows. The Morith joined first, then the Kasari, a race of small gray beings with 4 arms and minds like computers. They had been the hegemony's data processors before machines replaced them, and they still remembered how to infiltrate digital systems. Then came the Thule, massive creatures like walking mountains who could move heavy equipment without anyone noticing. Then others, species whose names Elena could not pronounce and whose forms she could barely comprehend. The Valori had conquered them all separately. They had broken them individually. They had kept them divided and weak. They never imagined that their slaves might unite against them. The weapon took shape in an abandoned mining tunnel 3 kilometers beneath the surface. It was not beautiful. It was a tangle of mismatched components from a dozen different civilizations. Exposed wires connected to salvaged circuitry. Cooling systems built from food processing units. A firing mechanism assembled from the trigger of a broken alien sidearm and the targeting sensor of a scrapped fighter craft. Kofi called it the Resonance Lance. Yuki called it the Equalizer. The Morith called it the Fang of Freedom. Elena simply called it Hope. 6 months into construction, disaster almost struck. A young human engineer named Marcus made a mistake. He hit a component in the wrong place, and a Valori patrol found it during a random inspection. The guards dragged Marcus before Overseer Sarek Vol for interrogation. Elena learned of the capture within minutes. She raced to the Overseer's office, her mind spinning through options. If Marcus broke under torture, everything was lost. If she did nothing, Marcus would die, and the Valori might find the weapon anyway. Either choice led to catastrophe. She found Sarek Vol examining the captured component. It was a power regulator, small and unremarkable. The Overseer turned its compound eyes toward Elena as she entered. "Commander Vasquez," Sarek Vol said. The creature had learned her name over the past 18 months. It found her useful for maintaining order among the humans. "Your worker had unauthorized materials. Explain." Elena had prepared for this moment. Every member of the Resistance had been given a cover story, a lie to tell if they were caught. The lies were designed to be believable and unprovable. "He was hoarding," she said. "Some of the humans have begun collecting components. They think they are valuable. They trade them for extra rations or better sleeping spaces. It is foolish, but it is not a threat." Sarek Vol's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Hoarding is against regulations." "Yes, and I have been trying to stop it. But the humans are stubborn. They attach sentimental value to objects. It is a weakness of our species." The Overseer studied her for a long moment. Elena kept her expression neutral, her breathing steady. She had learned how to lie over the past 18 months. She had learned how to appear harmless and obedient while plotting revolution. "The worker will be punished," Sarek Vol said finally. 20 lashes for unauthorized possession. You will ensure this hoarding behavior stops." "Yes, Overseer. If it does not stop, the punishment will be more severe. For everyone." Elena nodded and withdrew. Marcus received his 20 lashes that night. He did not scream. He did not beg. He took the punishment in silence, and when it was done, he looked at Elena with eyes full of determination. "I am sorry," he whispered through cracked lips. "Do not be sorry," Elena replied. "Be careful and be ready." The work continued. The Valori accepted the hoarding explanation. They increased patrols for a few weeks, then grew bored and returned to their normal routines. They could not imagine that their slaves were building a weapon. The very idea was absurd to them. 12 months into construction, Elena received word that changed everything. The hegemony's Grand Fleet was coming to Slag 7. The Grand Fleet was the pride of the Valori Empire. 100 warships led by the flagship Eternal Dominion, the largest and most powerful vessel ever constructed. It traveled from system to system, inspecting hegemony holdings and reminding the conquered species of their place. The fleet would arrive in 3 months. Elena gathered the resistance leaders in their hidden chamber. Humans, Morith, Kasari, Thule, and others crowded into the small space. The air was thick with tension. "We have a decision to make," Elena said. "The weapon is not finished. We need at least 4 more months to complete it. The fleet arrives in 3. "Then we cannot use it against the fleet," Victor said. "We wait." We finish the weapon, we find another target. Another target will not have the same impact, Yuki argued. The Grand Fleet is a symbol. Destroying even one ship from that fleet would send a message across the entire empire. It would prove that the hegemony can be challenged. And if we fail, asked Thesic, if we rush the weapon and it does not work, we will all die and our hope will die with us. The debate continued for hours. Every option was weighed. Every risk was calculated. In the end, Elena made the decision. We accelerate the timeline, she said. We work double shifts, triple shifts if necessary. We strip every cache on the moon. We use every resource we have. And in 3 months, when the Grand Fleet arrives, we give them a welcome they will never forget. It is suicide, Victor said. No, Elena replied. It is revolution, and revolution has never been safe. The final push began the next day. Humans and aliens worked side by side, sleeping in shifts, eating while they assembled components. The weapon grew larger and more powerful. The resonance lance took its final shape, ugly and beautiful at the same time. 2 months into the accelerated timeline, Sarek summoned Elena to its office. Your people's productivity has increased significantly, the overseer observed. Explain. Elena had prepared another lie. We have accepted our situation. We have adapted to our new lives. We are simply trying to prove our worth to the hegemony. Sarek Vol's compound eyes studied her. Elena felt those alien senses probing, searching for deception. She met the gaze without flinching. The Grand Fleet arrives in 30 cycles, Sarek Vol said finally. Fleet Admiral Keth Varos will inspect this facility personally. I expect continued adaptation from your people. Any disruption during the inspection will be punished severely. Do you understand? I understand, Overseer. Good. You are dismissed. Elena walked back to the barracks. Her heart pounded against her ribs. 30 days. 1 month. The weapon was almost ready. The power cells were almost charged. Everything they had worked for was coming to a single point. That night, she stood at a viewport and watched the red star burn. Somewhere out there, the Grand Fleet was approaching. 100 warships, thousands of weapons, millions of crew members, the full might of an empire that had never known defeat, and waiting for them was a weapon built from garbage. A weapon assembled by slaves, a weapon powered by hope and rage, and the absolute refusal to accept that humanity was beaten. We are coming for you, Elena whispered to the stars. You gave us your scraps, and we forged them into a blade. You taught us that we were nothing, and we learned that nothing has nothing to lose. She pressed her hand against the cold glass. In the tunnels below, the resonance lance waited. In the barracks around her, slaves dreamed of freedom. In the darkness between the stars, the Grand Fleet flew toward its destruction. The day of reckoning was coming, and humanity was ready. The resonance lance was complete. Elena stood before it in the deep tunnel, surrounded by the beings who had built it. Humans, Morth, Kasari, Thule, and others filled the chamber, their faces lit by the soft glow of salvaged light panels. The weapon dominated the space, a massive construct of twisted metal and exposed wiring that looked more like a sculpture of chaos than a weapon of war. It was 20 meters long and 5 meters wide. Its barrel was made from the heat exchangers of a dozen different ship engines, welded together in ways that should not have worked. Its power core was assembled from 17 different civilizations' energy technology, each piece modified to work with the others. Its targeting system came from a Valori fighter craft, its cooling system from a Kasari data center, its firing mechanism from human ingenuity and desperation. Kofi walked Elena through the final inspection. His hands were scarred from 18 months of secret work. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. But his voice was steady and proud. The frequency modulator is calibrated to the exact resonance point that Yuki identified, he explained. When we fire, the lance will produce a beam of energy that oscillates at precisely the right counter frequency to invert Valori's shields. The beam will travel at near light speed. The target will have no time to react. And the power? Elena asked. We have drained every salvage cell on the moon. We have enough for 2 shots. Maybe 3 if we reduce power to minimum survival levels in the barracks. But I would not recommend that. The third shot would be weaker. It might not be enough to destroy a capital ship. 2 shots, Elena said quietly, against 100 warships. 2 shots that can kill anything the hegemony sends against us. Kofi placed his hand on the weapon's barrel. This is more than anyone has ever had. This is more than anyone ever thought possible. Elena nodded. She walked around the weapon, examining every component. She saw the marks where different species had contributed their skills. Human welding next to Morith metalwork. Kasari circuitry connected to Thule power systems. The weapon was not just a tool for destruction, it was a symbol of unity, a proof that the hegemony's greatest weakness was believing its slaves would never work together. How do we aim it? She asked. Yuki stepped forward. She had spent the last month programming the targeting system, teaching it to recognize Valori ship signatures and track them through the atmosphere and into space. We have a direct line of sight through a natural rock chimney to the surface, she explained. From there, the targeting system can track any ship within 5,000 kilometers. We select a target, the system calculates the firing solution, and we pull the trigger. What about the Valori sensors? Will they detect us when we fire? Yes. The moment we fire, they will know exactly where we are, but by then it will be too late. The beam travels too fast to intercept. The first ship will die before they even understand what happened. The second shot can fire within 30 seconds of the first. After that, Yuki shrugged. After that, we either win or we die. Elena turned to face the assembled resistance. Hundreds of beings from a dozen different species, all looking at her, all waiting for her words. She had never wanted to be a leader. She had been a bureaucrat before the invasion, a coordinator of defense policy, not a warrior. But the invasion had changed everything. It had changed all of them. 3 days, she said. In 3 days, the Grand Fleet arrives. In 3 days, we show the hegemony what their garbage can do. I am not going to lie to you. Many of us will die, perhaps all of us. The Valori will not take kindly to slaves who fight back. But I ask you this, would you rather die on your feet or live on your knees? The chamber erupted in sounds of defiance. Human cheers mixed with Morith rumbles and Kasari clicks and Thule bellows. The noise was chaotic and beautiful, the sound of beings who had been told they were worthless, finally realizing their own power. Elena raised her hands for silence. We have 3 days to prepare. We need to position our people. We need to disable their communications. We need to make sure that when we strike with everything we have. The planning consumed every waking moment. Elena barely slept. None of them did. They reviewed every detail 1,000 times. They identified backup plans for their backup plans. They prepared for every possible response the hegemony might make. The Kasari revealed their greatest contribution. A virus that had been hidden in routine supply manifests for months, slowly spreading through the Valori computer networks. When activated, the virus would disable targeting systems on any ship within range of Slag 7. It would not last long, maybe 20 minutes before the Valori purged it from their systems. But 20 minutes was an eternity in combat. The Morith had organized work crews across the moon. When the signal came, they would seize control of key facilities and prevent the Valori from launching any ground-based response. The Thule would secure the transport shuttles, giving the resistance the ability to board disabled enemy ships. And the humans would fire the weapon. The night before the Grand Fleet arrived, Elena visited the Lance one final time. She found Kofi there, alone in the chamber, running diagnostics on systems he had already checked 100 times. Cannot sleep? She asked. Would you be able to sleep? He smiled weakly. Tomorrow we either change history or become a footnote in it. Either way, the universe will never be the same. Elena sat down beside him. The weapon hummed softly, its power cells slowly building to full charge. Do you think we can win? Define winning. Kofi leaned back against the rock wall. If you mean destroying the hegemony, then no. We cannot win that war with one weapon on one moon. But if you mean proving that they can be challenged, showing every slave in the empire that resistance is possible, giving hope to billions of beings who have forgotten what hope feels like, he nodded slowly. Yes, we can win that. And after, if we survive, then we build more weapons. We spread the schematics to every world. We turn their garbage into their nightmare. Kofi's eyes gleamed in the dim light. The hegemony has lasted for 10,000 years because they convinced everyone that they were invincible. Tomorrow we prove they are not. And once that illusion breaks, it can never be repaired. Elena was silent for a long time. She thought about Earth, now a conquered world under Vylori occupation. She thought about her family, gone forever. She thought about all the humans who had died fighting and all the humans who had surrendered, hoping to live. My grandmother survived World War II, she said finally. She was a child in Poland when the Nazis came. Her family was killed. Her village was destroyed. She spent 4 years hiding in forests and basements, eating rats and drinking rainwater. Everyone told her she would die. Everyone told her resistance was pointless. But she survived. She grew old. She had children and grandchildren. And she never ever stopped believing that ordinary people could defeat monsters. Kofi listened in silence. I used to think her stories were exaggerations, Elena continued. I grew up in a peaceful world. I never knew real darkness. I never understood what it meant to fight against impossible odds. She stood up and placed her hand on the weapon. Now I understand. Now I know what she knew. The darkness is never as strong as it pretends to be, and ordinary people, when they stand together, can defeat any monster. The morning came too quickly. Elena had not slept at all. She stood at her command post in the tunnel, surrounded by screens displaying information from sensors hidden across the moon's surface. Around her, humans and aliens waited at their stations, ready to carry out the plan they had spent 18 months preparing. At exactly 0700 local time, the sky tore open. The Grand Fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of metal locusts, carriers the size of cities, battle cruisers bristling with weapons, destroyers and frigates and support vessels beyond counting. At the center of the formation hung the Eternal Dominion, the flagship, a vessel so large that it cast a shadow over the entire moon. Elena watched the fleet deploy on her screens. 100 warships arranged in perfect formation, their weapons cold, their shields at rest. They did not expect resistance. They did not expect danger. They came to inspect their property, not to fight. All stations report, Elena commanded. Reports came in from across the moon. The Morith were in position. The Kasari virus was ready to deploy. The Thule had secured the shuttle bays. The humans at the Lance were ready to fire. Power levels, Elena asked. Full charge, Kofi replied over the communicator. Both shots ready. Targeting? Locked on the Eternal Dominion, Yuki confirmed. The moment you give the word, the flagship dies. Elena took a deep breath. This was the moment. 18 months of planning, 18 months of sacrifice, 18 months of hope and fear and determination. All of it came down to the next few seconds. Above them, Fleet Admiral Keth Varos broadcast a message to the moon. The Vylori's voice boomed from every speaker, translated into a dozen languages. Slaves of the hegemony, I am Fleet Admiral Keth Varos. I have come to inspect your progress and remind you of your place in the eternal order. You exist because we allow it. You live because we find you useful. Remember this truth, and remember that the hegemony is forever. Elena activated her own transmitter. She had configured it to broadcast on every frequency, to every speaker, to every slave on the moon, and every ship in the fleet. This is Commander Elena Vasquez of Earth. Silence. Every being on Slag 7 stopped moving. Every Vylori on every ship paused in confusion. A human was speaking on military frequencies. A slave was addressing the Grand Fleet. For 18 months, you have given us your garbage, your failures, your scraps. You told us we were nothing. You told us we existed only to serve. You told us to be grateful. Elena's hand hovered over the firing command. Today, we give your garbage back. She pressed the button. 3 kilometers below the surface, the resonance lance fired. The beam erupted from the rock chimney like a spear of white light, punching through the thin atmosphere and crossing the void in an instant. It struck the Eternal Dominion shields at precisely the calculated frequency. For one heartbeat, the shields flared bright. Then brighter, then impossibly bright, and then the flagship began to tear itself apart. The inverted shields turned against their own ship with savage fury. Hull plating crumpled. Weapon systems exploded. The great engines that had powered the vessel across 1,000 light-years detonated in cascading fireballs. In the space of 3 seconds, the largest warship in the hegemony's fleet became an expanding cloud of debris. Fleet Admiral Keth Varos and 20,000 crew members died without ever understanding what had killed them. The Grand Fleet froze. For a long moment, nothing moved. Nothing fired. The Vialori had no protocol for this. They had no response to the impossible. They simply stared at the space where their flagship had been, unable to process what they were seeing. Elena did not hesitate. "Second target acquired," Yuki reported. "Carrier Eternal Conquest, bearing 372. Fire!" The lance fired again. The carrier's shields inverted. Another ship died screaming into the void. Chaos erupted across the fleet. Ships broke formation in panic. Commanders screamed conflicting orders. Some vessels tried to charge their weapons. Some tried to flee. Some tried to coordinate a response. None of them succeeded, because the Kasari virus activated at that moment. Targeting systems went dark across 30 ships. Navigation computers crashed. Communication arrays filled with static. The Grand Fleet, the pride of the Valori Empire, was blind and deaf and terrified. And on the surface of Slag 7, the slaves rose. Elena watched on her screens as the plan unfolded. Morith workers seized control of processing facilities. Thule teams stormed the shuttle bays. Kasari hackers spread the virus to every system they could reach. Humans rallied with improvised weapons, overwhelming the small garrison of Valori guards who had never expected resistance. 3 destroyers broke from the fleet and dove toward the moon, their weapons charging for orbital bombardment. But their targeting systems were infected. Their plasma lances fired wildly, striking empty ground instead of population centers. Before they could recalibrate, the first stolen shuttles launched from the surface, filled with slaves who would rather die fighting than live another day in chains. The battle for Slag 7 had begun, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the Vialori hegemony knew fear. The battle lasted 14 hours. Elena had expected to die within the first few minutes. She had expected the hegemony's overwhelming firepower to crush their rebellion before it could truly begin. Instead, she watched from her command post as the impossible unfolded on her screens. The Grand Fleet was in chaos. Without their flagship to coordinate them, without their targeting systems to guide their weapons, the Valori commanders made mistake after mistake. Ships collided with each other while trying to maneuver. Plasma lances fired blindly into space, hitting nothing but empty void. Communication channels filled with panicked voices screaming for orders that never came. The 3 destroyers that had attempted orbital bombardment were the first to fall to the resistance. Their weapons could not lock onto targets. Their shields could not protect them from boarding parties. Stolen shuttles swarmed them like angry insects, latching onto hull plating and cutting through airlocks. Within 2 hours, all 3 ships were under resistance control. Elena coordinated from the tunnels, directing teams across the moon through makeshift communicators. Every few minutes, a new report came in. Processing Complex 7 secured. Barracks 12 liberated. Guard station at Grid 4 neutralized. The Valori garrison had numbered only 10,000 soldiers. They had never expected to fight. They had been stationed on a garbage moon to watch over broken slaves, not to defend against an armed uprising. They died surprised. Thesic led the Morith assault on the primary command center. The old reptilian had not held a weapon in 300 years, but his hands remembered. He moved through the corridors like a ghost, his yellow eyes seeing in the darkness that blinded his enemies. When the last Valori overseer fell, Thesic stood over the body and spoke words in his native tongue that his people had not been allowed to say since their conquest. "We are free." The words spread across the moon. "We are free. We are free." Every species took up the cry in their own language. The sound echoed through tunnels and processing plants and barracks that had been prisons for so long. Slaves who had forgotten what hope felt like remembered it now. But the battle was far from over. The remaining Valori fleet regrouped above the moon. Their targeting systems came back online as technicians purged the virus from their networks. 73 warships still operational. 73 vessels filled with soldiers who wanted revenge for their dead admiral and their burning flagship. Fleet Commander Varix Cole took charge. She was a veteran of 100 conquests, cold and ruthless and efficient. Within 4 hours of the initial attack, she had restored order to the fleet. Within 6 hours, she had developed a counterattack plan. Glass the moon, she ordered. Kill everything. We will find new slaves elsewhere. The bombardment began at hour 8. Plasma lances rained fire from orbit, turning the surface into a hellscape of flame and destruction. Processing facilities melted. Barracks vaporized. The garbage mountains themselves caught fire, filling the thin atmosphere with toxic smoke. The resistance retreated underground. The tunnel network that had hidden their weapon now became their shelter. Elena led evacuation efforts, directing thousands of beings into the deeper chambers where the orbital bombardment could not reach. The tunnels were cramped and dark and filled with the wounded and dying. But they held. How long can they keep firing? Elena asked Kofi over her communicator. Hours, days, weeks if necessary. Kofi's voice was grim. The fleet has more than enough power to burn this entire moon to bedrock. We cannot hide down here forever. Then we need to stop them from firing. How? The lance is drained. We have no weapons that can reach orbit. Elena looked at her screens. The 3 captured destroyers were still there, powered down and drifting in low orbit. The Vylori had not targeted them yet, probably assuming they were too badly damaged to be useful. The vessels were small compared to the rest of the fleet, designed for patrol and interdiction rather than heavy combat. But they were armed, and they were shielded. Get me Captain Chen, Elena ordered. Michael Chen was a former Chinese naval officer who had led the boarding parties against the destroyers. He was wounded, his arm in a sling from a plasma burn, but his eyes were clear, and his voice was steady when he responded. Commander, those destroyers have functional shields and weapons, correct? Functional, yes, but we do not have the crews to operate them properly. These ships are designed for Vylori crews of 200. We have maybe 50 people per vessel who know anything about flying them. Can they fight? Silence on the channel. Then slowly. They can fly. They can shoot. They cannot fight well. Against 70 warships, they would last maybe 5 minutes. 5 minutes might be enough. Elena's mind was racing. The hegemony fleet is bombarding us from a standard orbital position. They are not expecting a counterattack. If our destroyers can break their formation, even for a few minutes, it might buy us time. Time for what? Elena did not have an answer. She was improvising, making decisions based on desperation rather than strategy. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. If they stayed underground and did nothing, they would eventually die. The bombardment would continue until the tunnels collapsed or they ran out of air or water or food. Their only chance was to keep fighting, to keep pushing, to never stop moving forward. Time for something to change, she said. Launch the destroyers, attack anything that gets close, and broadcast everything on every frequency. Let the galaxy see what we are doing. Let everyone know that the hegemony can bleed. The 3 captured destroyers launched at hour 10. They rose from the burning surface on pillars of fire, their shields flickering as they pushed through the bombardment. The Vylori fleet saw them immediately. Fleet Commander Varix Cole turned her attention from the surface to the new threat. Destroy them, she ordered. Show these animals what happens when they dare to use our weapons against us. 12 cruisers broke from formation to intercept, their weapons charged with the characteristic whine of Vylori plasma technology. Their targeting systems locked onto the fleeing destroyers. But the destroyers were not fleeing. Captain Chen had understood Elena's true intent. He knew that 3 small ships could not defeat 70. He knew that 5 minutes of fighting would end in death. But he also knew that sometimes death could be a weapon too. The destroyers accelerated toward the cruiser formation at maximum thrust. Their shields glowed as they absorbed the first plasma bolts. Their weapons fired back, not at the cruiser's shields, but at their engines and sensor arrays. The shots were not powerful enough to destroy, but they were enough to damage, enough to distract, enough to create chaos. And then Captain Chen gave his final order. All ships, ram the nearest target. The destroyers hit the cruisers at full speed. The impacts were catastrophic. Shields collapsed, hulls crumpled, reactors went critical. In the space of 10 seconds, 3 destroyers and 3 cruisers became 6 expanding clouds of debris. Captain Chen and 800 resistance fighters died in the collision. They died with their hands on the controls. They died with defiance on their lips. They died free. But their sacrifice achieved something more important than mere destruction. The ramming attack shattered the Vylori formation. Ships scattered to avoid the debris fields. Commanders hesitated, suddenly uncertain. The bombardment of the surface paused as the fleet tried to regroup. And in that pause, something miraculous happened. Across the hegemony's communication network, the Battle of Slag 7 was being broadcast in real time. The Kasari had not just created a virus. They had created a backdoor that let them hijack broadcast frequencies across a dozen star systems. Every slave world in the sector was watching as humans and Morth and Kasari and Thule fought against their masters. Every conquered species was seeing that resistance was possible. On Thesser Prime, Morth workers stopped their machines and stared at screens showing their elders fighting for freedom. On Keswar, data centers went silent as Kessari analysts abandoned their posts to watch their brothers die with honor. On world after world and system after system, slaves looked up from their labor and saw something they had never seen before. They saw their masters bleeding. The first uprisings began within hours. They were small at first, scattered incidents, isolated acts of defiance, but they spread like fire through dry grass. The hegemony had never bothered to station large garrisons on most slave worlds. Why would they? Their slaves were broken. Their slaves were tame. Their slaves would never fight back. The hegemony was wrong. By the time Fleet Commander Varix Cole resumed her bombardment of a Slag 7, she received new orders from the capital. The uprisings were spreading. The fleet was needed elsewhere. Leave a token force to contain the moon. Return immediately to restore order across the Empire. Varix Cole protested. The slaves on Slag 7 had killed her admiral. They had destroyed her flagship. They needed to be exterminated, not contained. But the orders were clear. The hegemony had bigger problems now than one rebellious moon. 70 ships became 10. The bombardment continued, but at a fraction of its former intensity. The resistance survived. Deep in the tunnels, Elena received the news. The fleet was leaving. They had won. Not a complete victory, not a lasting victory, but enough of a victory to survive. Casualties? She asked quietly. Kofi's voice was heavy. 800 dead in the destroyer ramming, another 2,000 in the bombardment, 600 from the ground fighting. He paused. 3,500 total, out of 40,000 on the moon. Elena closed her eyes. 3,500 lives. 3,500 beings who would never see their homes again, never hold their families again, never know if their sacrifice had meant anything. They meant something, she said aloud, though no one had asked. They all meant something. The remaining Vylori vessels maintained orbit. Their weapons pointed at the surface, their commanders waiting for any sign of renewed resistance. But they did not attack. They did not invade. They simply watched and waited and feared. For the first time in 10,000 years, the hegemony was afraid of its slaves. And on Slag 7, in the tunnels beneath the burning surface, the resistance began to plan its next move. The weapon had worked. The attack had succeeded. The Empire was shaking. Now they had to figure out how to make it fall. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Slag 7. Elena stood on the bridge of the Humanity's Spite, a warship that should not have existed. It was assembled from captured Vylori vessels, salvaged components, and the endless creativity of beings who refused to accept defeat. The ship was ugly by any standard. Its hull was patchwork metal from 3 different civilizations. Its weapons were a mismatched collection of plasma lances, kinetic cannons, and jury-rigged energy projectors. Its engines had been pulled from 6 different ships and forced to work together through sheer engineering stubbornness. But it flew, it fought, and it carried the flag of the Free Alliance, a blue banner with a silver star that had become the symbol of rebellion across 40 star systems. Admiral Vasquez, said Communications Officer Li Wei, we are receiving a transmission from Hegemony Command. They are requesting negotiations. Elena smiled. It was not a kind smile. 6 months ago, the Hegemony had considered humanity a resource to be exploited. 6 months ago, their Supreme Commander would never have negotiated with slaves. Now their empire was burning, and they were desperate enough to talk. Put it through, she ordered. The main screen flickered, and the face of Supreme Commander Zareth Vi appeared. He was the highest-ranking Bylori still alive, elevated to his position after the old leadership had been killed in various uprising incidents across the Empire. His compound eyes gleamed with barely suppressed rage. "Human Commander," Zareth Vi said, his translator rendering his voice flat and mechanical, "you have caused significant disruption to hegemony operations. We are prepared to offer terms for the cessation of hostilities." "I am listening." "The hegemony will grant autonomy to the systems currently under rebel control. Your people will be allowed to govern themselves as a client state. In exchange, you will cease all attacks on hegemony vessels and infrastructure, and you will surrender the weapons schematics that have caused so much damage to our fleet." Elena let the silence stretch. Around her, the bridge crew of humans and aliens watched in anticipation. Through the viewports, she could see the rest of the Free Alliance fleet arrayed in formation. 37 ships of various sizes, all built or captured over the past 6 months, all crewed by former slaves who had learned that freedom was worth dying for. "Let me make sure I understand," Elena said finally. "You want us to stop fighting. You want us to give you the one advantage we have, and in exchange, you will let us keep a few systems that we have already taken from you." "The alternative is continued conflict," Zareth Vi replied. "The hegemony has resources you cannot imagine. We can produce 1,000 ships for every one you destroy. Eventually, we will crush your rebellion and restore order to our empire." "Perhaps," Elena clasped her hands behind her back. "But how many ships will you lose before that happens? How many systems will fall while you are fighting us? How many other species will see our example and rise up?" She leaned forward. "You are not offering us peace, Supreme Commander. You are asking us to surrender in exchange for a slightly prettier cage. And we did not fight our way out of one cage just to accept another." Zareth Vi's mandibles clicked in agitation. "You are making a grave mistake, human. The hegemony has existed for 10,000 years. We have crushed rebellions before. Yours will be no different. The rebellions you crushed before did not have the resonance lance." Elena smiled again, cold and sharp. "The schematics have already spread to every slave world in your empire. Every species you conquered now knows how to hurt you. You cannot take that knowledge back. You cannot unring that bell. The age of Bylori invincibility is over, and nothing you do will restore it." The Supreme Commander was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was harder, colder, stripped of any pretense of negotiation. "Then there will be war, real war, not these scattered skirmishes and isolated uprisings. We will bring the full might of the hegemony against you. We will burn your worlds and enslave your survivors. We will make an example so terrible that no species will ever dare to resist us again." "You can try," Elena replied, "but I want you to remember something, Supreme Commander. 18 months ago, we were garbage collectors on a forgotten moon. You gave us your scraps because you thought we were too stupid and weak to do anything with them. And we built a weapon that killed your Grand Fleet flagship and started a fire that is consuming your empire." She stepped closer to the screen, her eyes locked on the alien's compound gaze. "Imagine what we can do now. Imagine what we can build with the resources of 40 free systems. Imagine what happens when every slave in your empire realizes that the hegemony is not invincible." Elena's voice dropped to a whisper. "You should have killed us when you had the chance. Now it is too late." She cut the transmission. The bridge erupted in cheers. Humans and Morith and Kasari and Thule shouted and embraced, celebrating the defiance they had just witnessed. Elena let them have their moment. They had earned it. They had all earned it. But her mind was already moving to the next challenge. War was coming, real war. As Zareth Vi had promised, the hegemony would throw everything they had at the Free Alliance. The fighting would be brutal and bloody and long. Many who celebrated now would not live to see its end. She walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the hegemony was marshaling its forces. Somewhere out there, slave worlds were still waiting to be liberated. Somewhere out there, the future was being written in fire and blood. "Admiral," Kofi's voice came from behind her. He had earned his own ship now, a captured cruiser called the Junkyard Dog, but he often visited the Spite for strategy meetings. What are you thinking? I am thinking about my grandmother, Elena replied. She survived the Nazis. She watched her world burn and her family die. And she never stopped fighting, never stopped believing, never stopped hoping. And now? Elena turned to face him, the man who had first seen the potential in hegemony garbage, the man who had built their weapon from scraps and dreams, the man who had believed when belief seemed insane. Now I understand something she tried to tell me when I was young, Elena said. She said that empires look strongest just before they fall. They look invincible right until the moment they shatter, because their strength is not real. It is just fear made solid. And when you stop being afraid, when you stand up and fight back, you discover that the monster was always smaller than it pretended to be. She looked back at the stars. The dying red light of a distant sun painted the viewport in shades of blood. Out there, the hegemony waited. Out there, the war waited. Out there, the future waited. The Vailori ruled for 10,000 years because everyone believed they could not be defeated, she continued. We proved them wrong on Slag 7. We proved them wrong again and again over the past 6 months, and we will keep proving them wrong until their empire is nothing but ashes and their name is nothing but a warning to other tyrants. Kofi stood beside her, looking out at the same stars. It will take years, maybe decades. Many of us will not survive. I know. We might not win. I know that too. Elena placed her hand on the viewport, feeling the cold of space through the glass. But we are going to try, because that is what we do. That is what humans do. That is what free people do. We fight even when fighting seems hopeless. We hope even when hope seems foolish. We build weapons from garbage and dreams from despair. She turned to face the bridge, where her crew waited. Humans stood alongside Morith. Kasari worked at stations beside Thule. A dozen species that had been slaves 6 months ago now served together as equals, united by shared suffering and shared liberation. Set course for the Thesser system, Elena commanded. The Morith homeworld is still under hegemony occupation. 300 years of slavery ends today. The fleet moved into formation. 37 ships that should not have existed, crewed by beings who should have been broken, flying toward a battle they should not have been able to fight. The stars wheeled around them as they prepared to jump to hyperspace. Elena took her seat in the command chair. Around her, her crew prepared for war. Behind her, the galaxy stretched infinite and unknowable. Ahead of her, the hegemony waited with all its ancient power and terrible fury. She was not afraid. Fear was for people who had something to lose. Fear was for people who believed they could be beaten. Fear was for people who had not already looked into the abyss and decided to jump. Elena Vasquez had watched her world burn. She had been declared property. She had spent 18 months sorting garbage on a forgotten moon, while the universe told her she was nothing. And she had taken that nothing and forged it into a weapon that shook the stars. The hegemony had made a mistake when they enslaved humanity. They had made a mistake when they gave their captives access to discarded technology. They had made a mistake when they assumed that broken spirits could never be rebuilt. They had forgotten the most important truth about humans. Humans did not accept defeat. Humans did not surrender to despair. Humans took the worst the universe could throw at them and used it as raw material to build something better. They had crawled out of caves and conquered a planet. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars. They had turned every obstacle into an opportunity, every setback into a lesson, every piece of garbage into a treasure. The Vailori had given humanity scraps. Humanity had built an empire from them. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, vanishing from normal space in a flash of twisted light. They were going to war. They were going to free the Morith homeworld, and then the Kasari homeworld, and then every world that still wore chains. They were going to tear down an empire that had stood for 10,000 years and build something new from its ashes. They were going to win. Not because they were stronger or smarter or better armed, but because they had something the hegemony would never understand. They had hope. They had determination. They had the absolute refusal to accept that the universe could not be changed. The Vailori had conquered 1,000 worlds because they had the biggest ships and the most powerful weapons. But humanity had something more powerful than ships or weapons. They had the ability to look at impossible odds and say, we can do this. They had the ability to take garbage and see potential. They had the ability to lose everything and still find reasons to keep fighting. The war would last 7 years, billions would die, star systems would burn, the shape of the galaxy would be forever changed. But in the end, the Free Alliance would stand victorious on the ashes of the hegemony, and the beings who had once been slaves would build a civilization that would last for 10,000 years. All of it started with a pile of garbage and a group of humans who refused to accept that they were beaten. All of it started with a weapon built from scraps and dreams. All of it started with hope. And hope in the hands of humanity was the most dangerous weapon in the universe.